At least 5 U.S.-supplied M1A1 Abrams tanks have been destroyed in only a few weeks, taken down by low-cost Russian FPV drones that turned heavy armor into exposed targets. The losses forced Ukraine to pull every Abrams off the front line, a move that shocked many supporters but revealed how quickly modern warfare is shifting under drone pressure. Fresh footage from Ukraine's 47th Mechanized Brigade shows an Abrams pushing deep toward Russian positions near Donetsk, firing several precise shots that tore through a fortified infantry group. The strike was successful, but the real story sits behind the camera view. Even the most advanced Western armor now faces a battlefield where the sky is hostile and every move is tracked by cheap flying weapons. The Abrams remains powerful, fast, and well protected on paper, yet the new reality is brutal. FPV drones hunt from above, Russian artillery reacts within seconds, and any tank that stays in the open for too long becomes a priority target. This shift exposes the top armor problem that both sides understand well, and it is rewriting how Ukraine must use its most valuable machines. This opening scene is not just a dramatic clash, it marks a turning point in how Ukraine adapts. A question now hangs over the entire conflict. Can the Abrams survive the drone era and return as a decisive force? Or will the battlefield force a new chapter in armored warfare? The battle near Donetsk began with a clear mission because Ukrainian forces wanted to break a Russian firing point that had slowed several movements in the area. The 47th Mechanized Brigade pushed an Abrams tank forward once drone scouts confirmed the Russian infantry had settled inside a damaged building on the edge of the town. The crew drove through narrow streets under scattered machine gun fire and reached a position where the tank could fire at close range. The vehicle stopped behind a broken wall that gave partial cover and allowed the gunner to take a clean shot at the enemy. The first round hit the front of the structure and forced the Russian troops to move deeper into the rooms, and the second round caused the roof to collapse. The push was planned as a short strike rather than a long fight, because the area was known to have Russian drones searching for armor. The Abrams kept advancing because the gunner needed a better angle to destroy the remaining threat. The drone feed from the 25th Separate Assault Battalion gave the tank crew an updated view of the Russian movement inside the structure. The UAV held position above the street and marked the location where several Russian soldiers were trying to regroup. This information gave the Abrams a chance to adjust fire without wasting time, and each shot landed closer to the exact point where the Russian unit was hiding. The tank used a controlled pace because staying still too long would expose it to indirect fire. The coordination between the tank and the drone unit created a short kill chain that gave Ukraine the advantage at that moment. The video of the battle shows several upgrades on the Abrams because Ukraine has been forced to adapt to constant drone attacks. The tank carried a metal cage above the turret to block FPV drones that come from the top. The crew added extra plates to protect the rear section, and these plates covered the engine area that had become a common target for Russian operators. The upgrades looked improvised but practical, and the shape of the cage changed the silhouette of the tank when viewed from above. The drone scouts moved lower to inspect whether Russian troops had placed any mines or traps on the road ahead. The Abrams continued to fire until the main building was no longer usable for Russian forces. The direct result of the strike was the destruction of the Russian fighting position because the building collapsed after several accurate hits. The drone captured images of soldiers running from the ruins, and some took shelter behind a burned vehicle outside the structure. The tank crew used the last shot to break the vehicle and remove the cover. The number of Russian casualties is still unclear, but the footage confirms that the unit defending the block could not hold the position after the Abrams entered the area. The Ukrainian command decided to pull the tank back once the mission was complete, because the longer it stayed in the open, the higher the chance of being hunted by Russian FPV drones. The strike near Donetsk highlights how Ukraine uses short armored thrusts supported by drones, because this combination gives fast results without exposing the vehicle to long engagements. The Abrams returned to a covered position while drone teams continued to scan the streets and confirm that the Russian presence in that sector had been broken. The Guardian reported that these Ukrainian tactics became more common as drone threats increased across the front. The battle shows that heavy armor still plays a role when used with precision and timing, rather than extended assaults. Russian FPV drones target the Abrams because these drones operate in large numbers around Donetsk and create a constant threat across every open field. Drone operators move their systems across the front line using small teams that can change positions quickly, and they search for any movement from Ukrainian armored units. When an Abrams fires its main gun, a bright flash appears on thermal cameras, and this signal draws attention from Russian drone crews that monitor the area. This pattern means the tank cannot stay in one location after shooting, because the noise and heat from the weapon guide drones toward the position. The battlefield becomes even more dangerous when Russian teams deploy several drones at the same time, because each drone moves at high speed and can circle the zone until it finds the tank. Abrams units face additional pressure because Russian drones can approach from higher angles that expose the weaker parts of the armor. Kyiv Post noted that every Abrams lost in Ukraine was hit by a drone that attacked from above or from the rear, and this detail shows how Russian crews aim at the areas with the lowest protection. The top of the turret carries less armor than the front plate, and the engine deck is vulnerable once a drone operator identifies it. The Abrams can resist powerful shells on the frontal arc, but the drone threat comes from directions that the designers never planned for in sustained combat. Drone operators study the shape of the vehicle and learn where a single strike can create a fire inside the engine compartment. Once they identify this point, they guide their drone straight toward it and try to hit the tank while it is still responding to another threat. The Abrams becomes a priority target because its weight of nearly 70 tons creates a heavy signature that stands out on drone cameras. The tank moves slower than lighter vehicles, and this speed difference gives Russian drone crews extra time to adjust their flight path and choose the correct angle of attack. Whenever the Abrams advances across broken ground or narrow streets, the tracks create dust clouds that can be spotted from a distance. Drone teams observe these patterns and send a reconnaissance drone to locate the movement more precisely. If Russian artillery also operates in the same area, the Abrams faces even greater danger because drones can coordinate with guns that aim at the location where the tank was last seen. This cooperation allows Russian units to challenge the tank before it reaches a safe position. The role of the Abrams is also changing because modern drone warfare forces every armored crew to think differently. Ukrainian crews now understand that staying hidden matters as much as firepower, and this view shapes their tactics across the Donetsk sector. The tank can no longer drive into an open area without immediate drone support because Russian operators wait for any sign of activity. Ukrainian commanders deploy drones ahead of the Abrams to clear the air and map Russian watchers, and this step helps the tank avoid detection while it moves toward a firing point. Advanced armor offers protection against shells on the front line, yet altitude, speed, and precision from FPV drones redefine what vulnerability means. The tank remains a powerful asset when it fights in a coordinated group, but the presence of Russian drones pushes it into a new era where attention, timing, and concealment matter more than raw strength. The story of the Abrams at Donetsk proves that any vehicle, no matter its cost or size, becomes a target when drones control the sky. Ukraine is changing the armor and tactics of the Abrams because the battlefield around Donetsk forces every crew to handle constant drone attacks from high angles. The rise of FPV drones over frontline roads pushed Ukrainian engineers to install metal cages on top of the turret after several units confirmed that drones repeatedly targeted the upper part of the tank. The cage works as a simple shield that forces a drone to detonate early and gives the crew a short moment to react when scouts detect an incoming threat. The design looks improvised, yet it increases protection without adding too much weight, which is critical for a vehicle that already weighs nearly 70 tons. Crews accept the strange appearance because survival in tight urban terrain matters more than aesthetics. The turtle tank layout spread quickly because Russian drone operators repeatedly struck the rear engine deck. This trend forced Ukraine to extend armor around the back of the vehicle and block the direct approach path drones used in alleys and broken streets. The turtle pattern hides weak points, disrupts drone flight paths, and makes the engine area harder to identify on low-resolution cameras. The extra layer also reduces damage from indirect fire fragments that land close to the vehicle. The Abrams maintains its combat functions while lowering the chance of a drone reaching the engine bay. Ukrainian commanders adjusted their tactics because every second on the battlefield now carries more risk. The Abrams only appears once drone scouts confirm exact coordinates, and this rule applies to every armored thrust. The tank moves quickly toward a firing point, delivers 1 or 2 shots and returns to cover before Russian operators can update their targeting data. This approach limits exposure because Russian drone crews react fast when they detect heat or noise from the cannon. Ukrainian units hide the Abrams inside garages or behind collapsed structures until scouts identify a safe route. This rhythm helps Ukraine control the pace of each exchange and reduces the chance of a drone hitting vulnerable zones. Reconnaissance drones now play a central role because Ukraine wants a shorter kill chain during armored strikes. The scouts fly ahead of the Abrams and reveal Russian soldiers moving between trenches and damaged buildings. This cooperation gives Ukrainian forces a faster reaction cycle because the tank receives precise targeting information instead of searching under fire. Drone teams also scan roads for mines or traps that could slow the Abrams, giving the crew more confidence when navigating narrow terrain. The combination of drones, artillery, and armor forms a synchronized cycle where each element supports the others without delays. These upgrades and tactical changes highlight a shift from breakthrough operations to targeted strikes supported by drones. The Abrams no longer tries to push deep into enemy lines because the battlefield does not allow heavy armor to remain in the open. Ukraine now treats the Abrams as a precision asset that must be used at the right moment and withdrawn before drones can respond. The crews adapt to this new doctrine and understand that speed and information matter more than long engagements. These changes show how Ukraine is transforming armored warfare to survive the drone era and maintain pressure on Russian forces in the Donetsk sector. Ukraine decided to pull the Abrams from the front because the battlefield around Donetsk became too dangerous for any heavy vehicle that could not hide quickly. Ukrainian commanders began withdrawing the tanks around April 2024 after several crews confirmed that drones filled the sky above the main fighting zones. Russian drone operators expanded their reach across open areas and used new tactics that exposed the Abrams whenever it tried to move between firing points. The tank remained powerful in direct exchanges, yet the risk of being detected from above increased with every week of fighting. Ukrainian officers understood that the Abrams could not survive in a place where drones watched every road, trench, and destroyed building. Russian FPV drones created a threat that no heavy tank could ignore because even a small drone could damage the engine or disable the tracks. These drones use simple cameras to follow the heat and noise from the Abrams, and their low cost allowed Russia to launch them in large numbers without hesitation. The growing number of drone attacks made movement harder because each strike forced crews to take greater risks while searching for cover. Although the Abrams could resist strong frontal hits, the top of the turret and engine deck became clear weak points when viewed from above. This reality pushed Ukraine to reconsider how and when the tank should be used on the battlefield. American advisors supported the withdrawal because they concluded that the Abrams must operate differently in a drone-saturated environment. The United States believed Ukraine needed time to reorganize cooperation between tanks, drones, and artillery to create a safer combat rhythm. The Abrams required support from electronic warfare teams and reconnaissance units, and this level of coordination needed training away from the front line. Ukrainian brigades upgraded communication links and learned how to combine drone scouting with tank movement more smoothly. The withdrawal gave Abrams crews time to practice new methods without the constant danger of Russian FPV drones tracking their every move. Ukraine also used the pause to test new armor sets, because the tank needed stronger protection on the upper and rear sections. Engineers added turret cages and new plates around the engine compartment, and these modifications required careful testing before deployment. The improvements increased the tank's chances of surviving a drone hit because the new layers disrupted flight paths and reduced the impact angle. Ukrainian officers also studied how to position the Abrams in places where drones could not easily approach from above. These adjustments were important because the Abrams reacts differently after each modification due to its heavy frame. The withdrawal cannot be seen as a defeat because Ukraine still considers the Abrams a key weapon for future operations. The pause protected the tank from unnecessary losses while preparing it for new roles that match the current battlefield. The Abrams will likely return with a different purpose as Ukraine plans to use it in short, targeted thrusts instead of long pushes across exposed terrain. The withdrawal becomes a strategic reset that protects the Abrams today and strengthens its role in the battles that will follow. The wider context of the war shows how drones and deep strike weapons are shaping the way both sides plan their operations. Ukraine receives support from the Ukraine Defense Contact Group that includes about 50 countries, and this network has supplied billions of dollars to keep Ukraine fighting through long phases of the conflict. The United States plays the central role because it provides weapons, ammunition, and training that influence the balance on the front. The contact group coordinates deliveries of air defense systems, artillery shells, and armored vehicles, giving Ukraine a stable supply line while Russia tries to slow progress with drone and missile strikes. The support continues because member countries understand that Ukraine must stay resilient in a war driven by technology and fast intelligence. The United States announced a $6 billion assistance package because Ukraine needs stronger protection against Russian drones. Media noted that this package will expand air defense coverage and raise the number of interceptors Ukraine can use during large drone attacks. Russian forces launched drones in waves to overwhelm Ukrainian defenses, which pushes Ukraine to upgrade its detection and interception systems. The new package also includes support for long-range fires that allow Ukraine to strike deep Russian positions behind the front. Ukrainian commanders want more tools capable of destroying drone warehouses, communication hubs, and airfields where Russian aircraft prepare their missions. The goal is to give Ukraine enough firepower to counter Russian pressure and strengthen its ability to track incoming threats. Ukraine is not only defending its territory because it also conducts deep strikes that challenge Russian logistics. Long-range Ukrainian missiles target bridges, fuel depots, and ammunition warehouses that support Russian troops in the south and east. These attacks disrupt Russian supply routes and slow troop movement. Ukraine also uses new jet-powered drones that travel at high speeds and low altitudes to hit targets far from the front while avoiding radar detection. The strikes reach airfields, storage sites, and transport hubs that Russia depends on to hold occupied territory. By destroying ferries, fuel trucks, and command points, Ukraine reduces Russia's ability to respond quickly to frontline problems. Footage from these attacks shows large fires burning for days inside Russian regions. The confrontation shows that war is no longer centered on tank battles because drones challenge every unit on the ground. The struggle becomes a fight for control of the airspace above the battlefield, because controlling that space determines the pace of ground operations. The sky turns into a zone filled with sensors, cameras, and electronic interference that shapes every tactical decision. Tanks, armored vehicles, and infantry must adapt, because every movement is tracked and analyzed by drone teams on both sides. This stage of the war highlights the shift from traditional armored clashes to a conflict defined by drones and precision strikes. Ukraine uses deep attack weapons to hit Russian logistics, while Russian drones try to block movement along Ukrainian lines. The combination of long-range weapons and unmanned systems creates a layered battlefield where timing and coordination matter more than raw numbers. The future of the conflict will depend on which side controls the air above the front and disrupts the supply chains behind it, because that control decides which army maintains momentum. The scene in Donetsk closes with a brutal truth, because the Abrams that once ruled open ground now faces a sky filled with drones that can hunt any target in seconds. The tank still delivers clean hits and still shapes local battles. Yet the war has reached a point where strength alone cannot guarantee survival. Ukraine and the United States chose a different path, not abandoning the Abrams but rebuilding the way it fights by upgrading its armor, adjusting its tactics, and reshaping the entire support chain behind it. This shift matters because modern warfare now turns on speed, sensors, and timing, and the side that controls those elements gains the advantage long before tanks trade fire. Ukrainian crews understand this new reality and treat the Abrams as a precision tool that must strike hard and disappear before drones respond. Russian operators also understand the value of hitting it first, which is why every movement is tracked from above. The next phase raises an open question for anyone following this conflict, because the future of armored warfare is no longer guaranteed. The Abrams could return as a dominant asset once the new armor and tactics are tested, or lighter and more flexible vehicles could take the lead as drone pressure increases. Leave your thoughts below and stay with Military Force for clear updates. Like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next report.